Well, hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I'm recording this on Christmas Eve, hence the festive attire. And I don't know when I'm going to manage to get it posted, but I wanted to make sure I recorded it. And if you're watching this, I succeeded in getting it posted at some point this week. Anyway, Merry Christmas if you celebrate Christmas. Happy holidays. I hope you're enjoying the time of year if you don't. Anyway, wanted to do a Friday Reads video. I don't have a whole lot to talk about other than the reading that I did this past week. Mostly, I just want to say, wish everyone a happy time of year, again, whether you celebrate or not. And I hope you are staying safe. Most important of all, stay safe. And say thank you. I am approaching 2 years on BookTube. December 28th will mark 2 years since my very, very first BookTube video. And I want to say thank you for that. I have a blooper video coming next week to celebrate the occasion. I'm supposed to be off for work already. Today was supposed to be my first kind of quote-unquote vacation day, but I've already had to do some work. And it's Christmas Eve, so that kind of sucks. But, it is what it is. And I'm not going to let that get me down. I love the holiday season. It makes me happy. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be happy, spend time with my family. And tonight we are having dinner with our neighbors. We had formed a bubble with them for Thanksgiving, and we're spending Christmas Eve with them tonight. So that's going to be fun. It is the safest celebration we could possibly think of. I hope you have found a safe way to celebrate as well. Again, if you celebrate at all. If this is a bad time of year for you and you don't like the holidays and you're sad, that is totally okay. My foster son, for example, kind of struggles with celebration during the holidays, and that's okay. So you do you. One thing I wanted to note, last week I mentioned that I had been reading an ebook version of An Extraordinary Union that had become available through my Libby app, and I didn't like the experience of reading an ebook on my phone because I kept getting pop-ups, texts, notifications, and things like that that were just, it was totally distracting. I got a lot of comments that I should get a Kindle. I love the suggestion. To be perfectly honest, I do not buy books on Kindle anymore, have not for a while. And so a Kindle would not be super useful for me. Although I do really like the suggestion. If anything, I would probably get a Nook from Barnes & Noble because the Kindle, I don't like giving money to Amazon if I don't absolutely have to. I usually try to source books through other locations, so I don't really like the idea of having a Kindle as a result. If I were to get an e-reader, I would definitely do Barnes & Noble. In fact, I only purchased, I think, maybe 1 or 2 ebooks this year, and they have been on through Barnes & Noble. I have that app on my phone. But by and large, if I do an ebook, I get it through the Libby app or the Scribd app and read it that way. So again, there's no purchase actually happening, but I just wanted to kind of note, I do love the suggestion. I don't like supporting Amazon. I prefer shopping local whenever I can. And if I'm going, I may look into like a Nook or something like that. So thank you for that to everyone who suggested it. It was actually a good reading week. I managed to finish 2 books, and the first one was Burnt Sugar by Avni Doshi, which is relief. I finally have it done. I started this book a long time ago. If you follow along, you know that. You know that I was really enjoying it, but I kind of started really getting overwhelmed and had a really difficult time reading in the lead up to the election and in the week of the election and then a little bit after. And I had to kind of build my way back up. So as much as I was enjoying Burnt Sugar, I did kind of put it to the side. And I really wanted to make sure I came back to it before the end of the year. I was halfway through. I actually tore through the last half of this book. I was a little worried that I was not going to remember where I was or where the story was and have to remind myself of things. I did for the first 5 pages, but I remembered enough of it that I was able to just like flip back a couple of pages or to the chapter, the previous chapter, and go from there. But I was really just immediately immersed back into the world of this book and transfixed by the writing. I really enjoyed this book. It is poison. And yet I really enjoyed the experience of reading it, and I recommend it. I think I've seen some negative things about it. I think because it is kind of an angry, negative book, like I said, it is kind of poison. I think that's where a lot of people don't like it. I appreciate it a lot. I think it's a very different experience from reading Shuggie Bain. A lot of people say Shuggie Bain is depressing. To me, there's like love and hope in Shuggie Bain. This is a much more angry, kind of toxic book. And they are both interesting companion pieces to each other for that very reason. And I'll probably talk more about this when I do my monthly wrap up, but I did want to mention that I did finish it. Yay. And I really enjoyed it. I love it. This will definitely be featuring in my favorite books of 2020. I've had a really good reading year. I was starting to work out my top 20, and I may have to do a top 21 because there are just a lot of books, and this will definitely be in the top 20. So stay tuned for that. But I think what I will say for now is that I think I'll gotta repeat what I had mentioned earlier. This book really plays with memory in a very interesting way. And it teases out details and secrets over time. And there's a really interesting turn that it takes with the daughter character. And so the daughter is taking care of her mother, and trying to deal with the fact that her mother never really cared for her, or at least that's her perception of it. But the idea of there are really interesting things that are done with the topic of memory, and I don't want to get into it too much right now. I'm trying to do a short video so I can get back to Christmas Eve. Just to say, I finished this. I really enjoyed it. It was worth the wait. It was worth the effort. And I definitely recommend it to you. I still would say I'm glad Shuggie Bain won the Booker Prize. And I have not read some of the others that were finalists, but I think if not for Shuggie Bain, I probably would have, even if Shuggie Bain hadn't won and this had, I would have been happy, but I'm glad Shuggie Bain did win. And this was definitely a worthy finalist. I really enjoyed it a lot. The other book I finished this week was The Vanishing Half by Brit, Bennett. I was listening to this on audio. If you follow along, you know the whole odyssey. I started listening to the audio, even though I have this physical copy earlier in the year, somewhere around the summer, July, maybe, and I didn't finish it before it was due back. I was listening to it through the Libby app. So I had 2 weeks. I didn't finish it in time, and I got back on the waiting list because I figured I started the audiobook. I wanted to finish the audiobook. And finally it became available. And that one I did start over because I knew there were enough kind of complex details in the book that I was going to have to go back to the beginning and go all the way through. And I did. And this time I did manage to finish it in time, and I finished it this week, and I really enjoyed it. This is another one that's going to be in my top 20. Again, I've had a really good reading year, and what better Christmas present could I have than that? This book does a lot of really interesting things with identity, and again, I'm going to save a lot of this conversation for my December reading wrap-up, but this book does a lot of really interesting things with identity. It talks about identity mostly in terms of a form of reinvention, or invention or reinvention, and how you can create it and how fluid it is. But it also does it talks about identity from a lot of different angles, and it also deals with it as a form of activation. And I think that's really interesting. And I think the best thing about this book is that it comes at identity from all these different angles. They're all really interesting. And even though it's coming at it from a lot of different directions, it manages to give you really thought-provoking things about each different angle. And it leaves you with a lot to discuss. This would be a fantastic book club book if you are a book club person, because I feel like even if you don't like it, there's a lot to discuss. If you're unfamiliar, the premise is that it follows two sisters. They are twins. They live in a community of light-skinned Black people who take kind of pride in being light-skinned. So the book also deals with colorism a lot. And in this community, dark-skinned Black people are really shunned, and you should not mix with them because your children, the goal is to be as light as possible. So these two twin sisters are light-skinned. One of them ultimately decides to pass as white, and the other one leaves the community but ends up having a child with a darker skinned man and ends up back in the community, so she kind of stays tethered to where she was. And then the book really moves from there. The sisters separated in different areas, living very different lives, and it moves forward with them. And I don't want to get into like a spoiler territory, and I said I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about this book, so I don't want to get into too much. But one of the things that's interesting is that the sister who decides to pass as white, Stella, has a daughter. And the daughter and her journey is featured a lot in the second half of the book. And I think it's a really interesting mirror image of Stella's journey in life and the choices that she makes. And when I say mirror, I mean very similar but opposite. And it reminds me of, I don't know if you've heard of a play called Clybourne Park, but there's a play, I believe it won the Pulitzer. I don't remember even when it was produced. I did not see it produced, but I read the play because I was interested in it. So it takes the idea of the raisin in the sun and then re-examines the story in a flipped direction from roughly 50 years later. So if you remember A Raisin in the Sun, one of the central ideas in that book, plot points in that book, is that this Black family buys a house in a white neighborhood, and the white neighbors do not want them to move in. And there's a lot of conflict around that. So Clybourne Park imagines that same neighborhood roughly 50 or 60 years later, and kind of imagines that after this family moved in, other white neighbors moved out, the property values went down, and it became a quote-unquote black neighborhood. And now, in the present, which was roughly 10 years ago that this play was produced, a white family moves into the neighborhood and causes a lot of conflict because the black neighbors are worried about gentrification. And obviously, Lorraine Hansberry would not be worried about gentrification at the time she wrote A Raisin in the Sun, because very different problems she was dealing with. But it takes the story and flips it in a really interesting direction, and you see two different sides of the same story. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. I think the way Stella's story and then her daughter's story are really interesting reversals of each other. And I really enjoyed that. And I love a complicated family story, and this is definitely a complicated family story. So I enjoyed it. The writing is good, I would say, but I think the main attraction of this book is the thought and care that Brit Bennett puts into crafting the story and the ideas that go into it, and the ways she gives you so much to consider. And I really appreciated that. I thought it was great. And I definitely see why this has been popping up on a lot of year-end best lists. Could be a huge contender for the Pulitzer Prize, actually. I would not be surprised if it wins at all. But I'm not going to go down that road. You can see I keep thinking about the Pulitzer Prize all year long and contenders for it. And I think there are some really interesting possibilities for next year, but it's not until April. So I don't want to get ahead of myself. But I have a lot to think about between now and then. And I would actually really love if a book like this, because I do think it is a really thoughtful and considered examination of colorism and race in America. And I definitely see why it has ended up on a lot of year-end best lists as well. And it will be on mine as well, because as I said, I've had a really good reading year. There have not been a whole lot of duds. So that is The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett. I keep wanting to call her Bit Bennett. Oh my God. As for what's next, I have actually already started an ebook, something my husband had recommended to me. It is called Wild Love. It is part of the Forever Wild series of romance novels. I like LGBTQ romance novels, and my husband is a big fan of them. He wanted me to read one, and I was looking for something quick and kind of fun and easy to read, and picked it up because I wanted to do it before the end of the year. And I'm actually really enjoying it so far. I think I am 20% of the way through it so far, so I will definitely finish it this year. I could probably, if I really wanted to, finish it by tomorrow, but I'm taking things slow, not putting a whole lot of pressure on myself. Once I suspended my reading goal for the year, I also kind of got away from the idea of just pressuring myself to get things in before the end of the year. So this one will be easy to finish, and I'm enjoying it, but no pressure. And I'm not really thinking too much ahead. I'm thinking of one book that I might try to fit in before the end of the year. That is Gachar Gochar by Vivek Shanbang. I had picked this up because it fit in with my reading goal, which was read outside your comfort zone. And part of, there were a lot of aspects to that goal, but one of them was that I really wanted to explore authors and stories from different continents other than North America and Europe. And this would cover India. And I had never got around to it, and eventually I suspended the reading goal, but I figured this is a story that has kind of, I've wanted to pick it up all year long and haven't gotten to it, and it's only small. I think it's barely over 100 pages. It is 118 pages. So I might, once I finish Wild Love, I might pick this up and see how that goes. I could probably, if there's a day when we're not doing anything over the next week between now and New Year's, I could probably do this in a single day. So I'm thinking about this and would like to try to fit it in, but again, I'm not putting any kind of pressure on myself. Whatever I get to, and it will be what it will be. So other than that, I did just get access to an audiobook on Libby. It is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This is the prequel to the Hunger Games books. And I was very curious when she announced that she was doing a prequel, but I didn't want to run out and grab it, and I'm always very suspicious when another book in a series is released. If you've followed along, you know I really struggle with the idea of like whether or not Find Me should have been published, or whether or not you should leave Call Me by Your Name alone, whether or not The Handmaid's Tale needs a sequel. I still have not read actually either Find Me or The Testaments. I almost forgot the name of the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, but it's so. there was a little bit of that, and then I never really heard much about the Ballad, at least not in my corner of BookTube. I never really heard much about the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And then my niece read it, and she actually said she thought it was really interesting. So that is kind of what made me a little bit interested in it. I got on the wait list for the audiobook, and then I completely forgot that I was on the wait list for the audiobook. Point being, it's available now. I don't, since I'm in theory not going to be working for the next week, I don't know if I'm really going to have a whole lot of time to start this, because usually I listen to audiobooks while I work on other things, and I listen again at bedtime. So I might start listening to this before bed over the next week. Will I finish it before the end of the year? I don't know, but it's available. It's a thing that I have access to, so I might start working on that this week. But again, I'm really trying not to think too much about what's next. I just want to relax, enjoy the holidays, and kind of ease into the new year. 2020 has been tough enough. Don't want to put any pressure at the end of the year. So those are the 2 books that I finished this week. And it's interesting that I finished them both the same week, and when I had read half of them earlier and got back to them. And so the time, it's funny when timing works out like that. So that's what I've finished, what I'm currently reading. There were no DNFs, and what I could potentially be working on next, but we'll see. Stay tuned. I'd love to hear what you have going on in your reading life or your regular life, what you're doing for the holidays, if you're staying safe, if you're not doing anything for the holidays, just, updates. Hope you're doing well. You can put them in the comment section down below. As always, I really appreciate your time. And again, I'm coming up on my 2-year anniversary on BookTube. So if you follow along, thank you for making this a wonderful place to be. And I am very thankful and grateful for that. So as always, thank you for your time. I will be back. Until next time, happy reading and Merry Christmas, if you celebrate.